Spirit boards, talking boards, Ouija boards. Whatever you like to call them, they all do the same thing. In most cases, they're mass-produced the same way any board game is, with a giant sticker on a sturdy cardboard backing. Unless you want to get fancy with other mediums like paper or cake. Spirit boards supposedly allow the living to communicate with the dead, but what's weird about them is the fact that, especially the most well-known one, is mass-produced and classified by its manufacturer as a board game. But it's certainly not without its flaws. Look at those 2 stars. Hasbro even felt the need to advise people to have patience with the thing, cause the spirits can't be rushed. Well, obviously. Your calendar fills up quick with all those social engagements when you're dead. Check out these mixed reviews. This poor person just wants to talk to their mom. Did you ever think that maybe it's not the board, but that your mom doesn't want to talk to you? Seriously, how did a major game company become interested in mass-producing such a controversial item? Well, for that we'll have to take a trip to Europe in the late 18th century. 2 new philosophical movements known as Swedenborgianism and Mesmerism were taking hold. Swedenborgianism was based on Emanuel Swedenborg's writings in the spirit world, which he claimed to visit through trances, and Mesmerism was based on the paranormal phenomena that occurred with hypnotized people who came out of trances and, like Swedenborg, claimed to have seen the other side, sometimes bringing with them higher abilities like telepathy, clairvoyance, or xenoglossy. Mesmerism took a firmer hold of the American people, and it was in 1848 when the Fox sisters of Hydesville, New York, helped make spirit communication popular with their performance of rapping sessions, where they allegedly communicated with the dead through dope-ass beats and face-melting rhymes, being so lyrically poisonous they could coerce the dead into talking. The American people now had a more tangible means of interacting with spirits. It's just kind of too bad that by 1888 the Fox sisters admitted that most of their sessions had been fraudulent, producing the knocking sounds that the spirits supposedly had communicated through by tapping their own toes on the floorboards, and thereby teaching us in the present day just how gullible people were in the 1800s. But regardless, the movement now known as spiritualism had been born, and people were eager to speak with their beloved dead, now that it seemed completely possible. And who could really blame them? I mean, it was the 1800s. People were dying of who knows what all the time. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, typhoid. Hell, there had been a cholera pandemic that swept through North America from 1827 to 1835 that killed an estimated 150,000 Americans. People were experiencing a lot of death in those days. And chronic diarrhea didn't always give you time for closure with your weird Aunt Mary before she wholly succumbed to the dehydration and severe stomach cramp. By promoting accessible means of mediumship, spiritualism offered people that closure and the comfort that their loved ones were okay, being free of their physical ordeal of pooping themselves to death. Oh, and just a little factual nugget on that cholera thing. Cholera provided only one of the many pathways for a person to fall into a coma, and they didn't have the most reliable means of being able to tell if you were truly dead back then. And it was estimated by J. Stenson Hooker of the British Medical Association that, at least in England and Wales, 2,700 people were buried alive each year. 2,700 people buried alive each year. Just let that sink in for a second. In fact, being buried alive was such a real concern that there was an Association for the Prevention of Premature Interment founded in 1895, who proposed many solutions to solve the problem, the most cost-effective one being a lightly stoppered chloroform flask to be placed in each coffin, so that just in case the person was buried alive, they would be peacefully killed by the chloroform, cause they sure weren't getting out of that anyway. So again, that closure thing through mediumship to make sure their beloved dead had made it through to the other side, okay, was kind of a thing. But simple rapping sessions eventually wouldn't be enough. Like all things, spirit communication would evolve into more elaborate means. In 1853, a French spiritualist, Monsieur Planchette, created a little wooden board with 3 legs. Two of the legs were on wheels, and the third leg was a pencil. The user would place their fingertips on the wooden board and invite the dead to guide their movements to write messages or draw pictures. This invention was called the planchette, with little wonder why. In 1868, American toy makers began to mass-produce the planchette to keep up with the spiritualism fad. However, in the good old American spirit of taking things and making them better and faster because gosh damn dead people take their sweet-ass time to write and draw things like the living have a f***ing day, spiritualists in Ohio took the idea of the planchette one more accessible step further by redesigning the planchette piece itself and giving it a companion board with the letters of the alphabet and numbers scrawled across it for the piece to point to. And thus, the talking board was born. However, something doesn't truly exist unless someone is making a mad profit off of it, which is a fact that Charles Kennard of Baltimore, Maryland realized with profundity. So he grabbed a couple guys, Elijah Bond and Colonel Washington Bowie, to start the Kennard Novelty Company to exclusively make and market their own brand of talking board. None of these men professed to be spiritualists per se, but they were definitely capitalists who could recognize a niche market when it came their way. So they already had the talking board thing set, but they needed an identifiable name. Many people think the Ouija board got its name from the French and German words for yes, but that's just crack stupid. The story actually goes like this. Helen Peters, who was Bond's sister-in-law and supposedly a strong medium, sat with Bond at the board and after placing their hands on the planchette, asked what they should call it. Perhaps miraculously, the planchette began to spell out that the board wished to be called the Francis Percival Thick Twistle Board of Mystical Wonderment and Happy Fun Times. Oh, by the way, how are you, Mr. Wilson? Well, Bond apparently knew enough about product design to realize that putting the Francis Percival Thick Twistle Board of Mystical Wonderment and Happy Fun Times, oh, by the way, how are you, Mr. Wilson, was going to be hard to place on a wooden talking board, not to mention the fact that he didn't know any Mr. Wilsons. Helen Bond interjected that they just call the board Ouija after her favorite author, Marie-Louise Ramée, whose pseudonym was Ouida, and whose picture she wore in a locket around her neck, because fangirling has just always been. Then the two of them made up the story that if anyone asked what Ouija meant, that the board had spelled out good luck. So, by now you're asking yourself, why do we pronounce it Ouija and not Ouija? Well, it is supposed to be Ouija, but humanity just can't be bothered to pronounce the words it makes up properly. Enough people started saying Ouija, and it just stuck. Anyway, as the story goes, on February 10th, 1891, Bond and Peters took the board and their happy asses to the patent office. But the patent officer refused to let the application continue unless he had a demonstration, and he, with Elijah Bond and Helen Peters, sat at the board and asked it to spell out his name. Funnily enough, the patent officer must not have known that Bond had been a patent attorney, where it's possible that Bond may have known the man's name, nor did he think it possible that he might have guided the planchette unconsciously himself, or a mixture of the two things occurring. Regardless, the board nailed it, and the officer awarded Bond and Peters the patent. By 1892, thanks to the popularity and success of the Ouija board, the Kennard Novelty Company was able to increase its number of Ouija-making factories, from just one in New Baltimore to 7 factories total, located in New Baltimore, New York, Chicago, and London. But by the following year, Charles Kennard and Elijah Bond were done with the business, leaving it to Colonel Washington Bowie. And Colonel Washington Bowie would later sell the remaining business to William Fuld in 1919 for the extravagant sum of $1. And as a point of weird interest, William Fuld would die in 1927 from a freak fall from the roof of a new factory that the Ouija board had advised him to build. After its official inception, the Ouija board only grew in popularity, but more so throughout history's more challenging times like World War I and the Great Depression. And it makes sense because good grief, mediums are expensive. And the Ouija board was a $1 do-it-yourself alternative, which after a while didn't make the mediums too happy. In 1967, sales of the Ouija board would soar again, even outselling Monopoly, especially since one may assume it was a lot harder to divine answers about family members in Vietnam or what was up with the race riots breaking out in the Midwest on a Monopoly board. That same year, Parker Brothers bought the rights to the Ouija board from the Fuld Company. Parker Brothers would be bought by Hasbro in 1991, and thusly that's how Hasbro owns it now. It's interesting to note that for the most part, people saw the Ouija board as being pretty harmless. Norman Rockwell even had the board featured on one of his covers to the Saturday Evening Post. In general, the Ouija board really didn't seem to get its ominous reputation until 1973, thanks to The Exorcist, which was based on true events, and used the Ouija board as the means to explain the demonic possession of an innocent little girl. While the movie did the most damage to the Ouija board's harmless reputation, truth be told, creepy incidents involving the board had already been a-happening. In 1921, the New York Times had a report about a woman who had left her mother's dead body in her living room for 15 days before burying her in the backyard because the spirits that communicated with her through the Ouija board told her to. In 1930, 2 women in Buffalo, New York murdered another woman because the spirits that communicated with them through their Ouija board told them to. So the idea of demonic entities influencing people, or people being open to evil suggestions coming through on the Ouija board, was not a new thing. However, The Exorcist, with its head-spinning, projectile-vomiting visuals, was most effective in changing the populace's mind. 'Cause, being convinced by the dead into murdering someone and leaving the corpse in your living room is obviously one thing. But being the recipient of regurgitated pea soup to the face? It's not how America rolls, baby. And since then, the Ouija board has had the polarizing reputation for being a simple, effective ploy in horror movies, as well as a disappointing tool for divination, and yet an equally decent cost-effective tool for mediumship, while being an open door for demonic entities to your living room who like to mess up your crap. And while there are people who swear that the Ouija board not only works, but did in fact invite Satan in for much more than a smoke and a pancake, there are many who continually insist that the board is completely harmless, working on nothing more than the ideometer effect. In 1852, William B. Carpenter proposed the idea of the ideometer effect, which states that the human body produces tiny and involuntary muscular movements in response to subconscious desires. This could certainly be the explanation for the fact that the Ouija board planchette moves at all, even when the people around it swear to consciously not be moving it. However, I can't personally believe that it explains everything. I myself had a very strange experience with the Ouija board many years ago, where the ideometer effect just doesn't fit nicely as an explanation, since the answers I received were very distinct and had nothing to do with my desires, or even the desire for the lack of desire. And let's not forget, a person may ask a spirit board any number of any kind of questions, some with expectations and objective answers, and some without. To color every convincing Ouija board experience with the black and white answer of,
"It's just the ideometer effect happening,"
is too easily dismissive. To say that it's just their imagination or desire for attention that can be attributed to anything else that happened during or after the session is quite a hefty claim in some cases. Which actually brings me to the last point I wish to make about the Ouija board. In my research, I often found that once I made it to the part about the ideometer effect, the author of the article would make the point that, since it's just the ideometer effect happening, Ouija boards and all divination items of their ilk are completely harmless, and anyone who believes otherwise has shit for brains. Well, ideometer effect or no, I can't agree. Let's pretend that ghosts, spirits, demonic entities, and all of that is hokum. There is no spirit world or afterlife. Now, regardless of whether or not that is true, you can't prove that those things don't exist beyond a shadow of a doubt. And one thing that all people know that actually is a provable fact is that things we can't see can hurt us. In many paranormal investigation shows, you'll often see people who claim to have never believed in the existence of ghosts, but then find themselves in the midst of crazy-ass paranormal doings. So, hypothetically, we can take a person, even one who consciously does not believe in ghosts, and let's say they have a sit-down with the Ouija board, and through the workings of their subconscious and therefore the ideometer effect, they have themselves a merry little disturbing experience. Like, for example, the board spells out, "Hi, I'm Todd from Branson, and I'm sending Zozo to kill you. My dad knows him. He runs the dealership with my dad." Why would their subconscious do that? I don't know. Maybe this person secretly craves the possible attention and their subconscious mind seizes the opportunity. Now, that person most likely would be unnerved because they consciously didn't make the planchette spell out those words, so as they go about life, they find every unpleasant thing that happens becoming a confirmation that Todd from Branson, Zozo, or his dad is causing bad things to happen. This person then starts making life decisions based in fear and paranoia because of a phantasm their subconscious mind created for whatever subconscious reason. I'm not saying that I don't believe in the power of the Ouija board to communicate with spirits or summon demonic entities. I'm just saying that when you open yourself up to the spirit world, or even just your subconscious, just because the demons you accidentally summon may be your own, doesn't mean they won't mess with your life. And people who are obviously oblivious to psychology and like to use crap logic and claim ideometer effect all over the place, who are going to hurt people with their ignorance, well, they make me sick to my ass. Anyway, who wants to play Who's That Investigator? Okay, here are your clues. He is the founder and chairman of the board at the Talking Board Historical Society. He's the world's foremost collector and historian of talking boards, and much of the historical information in this presentation came from his interviews to track down the true origins of the Ouija board. He has collaborated on various films, including Ouija, Ouija Origins of Evil, and What Lies Beneath. And if you're having trouble calling his face to mind, you may have seen him on his numerous TV appearances, talking about spirit boards like on Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures, Mysteries at the Museum, Paranormal State, and a shit ton of others. If you've guessed Robert Murch, then give yourself a gold skull, you paranormal info-loving little freak you. If you want to know more about Robert Murch and his work, check out his website at robertmurch.com. That's it for me. I hope you learned something new and had some fun along the way. Hit the like button if you liked it, subscribe only if you wanna, leave me a joke or your personal Ouija board experiences in the comments, and remember, you become what you love, so choose your loves wisely.